we're behind the blue screen. When we open, do you want to introduce yourself, or do you want me to introduce
I
you?
don't care.
All right.
Whatever you want to do.
I'll throw it to you. I'll say, after Buddy says, and I'm your co-host, Buddy, you introduce yourself. All right.
Okay. You're not gonna throw it to me?
Well, we don't. Do you want me to throw it to you?
I was just kidding. It sounded like you said you were gonna throw it to me.
Yeah, and then I
That
realized
you
that I don't
immediately
actually
but you
do
don't
that
play
most
it.
of the time,
Yeah,
right?
all right,
Like,
do you think it'll be fine?
hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And I'm your guest, Greg Tango.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about an Italian Hoagie opera. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks what we do on this podcast?
This podcast, listen, on this podcast, we like to talk about indie baseball, the cinematography behind indie baseball feature films, okay? We're talking about Eephus, okay? Most of you, I think, will have heard, if you have paid any attention to the podcast over the last maybe 6 months or a year. When did you start talking about Eephus? You've mentioned Eephus a bunch of times on the podcast at this point, Mango.
I think I might have even mentioned it when the Kickstarter, which is now
Oh wow,
hidden.
that's like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, listen, there are some diehard Eephus fans in the chat, clearly, and we're gonna talk about it because we saw it. So we went to the Concord, New Hampshire showing, and with a bunch of people, and we all watched the movie, and then one of our friends stayed behind for the Q&A. The rest of us bailed immediately and went and got, did whatever we ended up doing that night. And I guess we're here to fucking talk about it.
Yeah, and in case you haven't been looped in, my brother Greg here is a cinematographer on the film Eephus. You guys can see it out there, can see it in theaters in a couple of weeks, right, Greg? It's
So March 7th it opens up in New York, and after March 7th it starts to spread across the country. In all sorts of different places. It's all over. I think they've linked the map and one of the websites in the chat/description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've linked the map, but I'll work on that.
Eephusfilm.com, Music Box, Eephus. If you just Google Eephus film, it pops up. You'll figure it out.
Okay, I also want to be clear. Eephus is spelled Eephus. Okay, we're gonna say it a lot, but just remember, this is a spelling bee. There's a BH in there that will trip you up. Where do you want to start? I'm actually kind of most interested in. You mentioned a fucking commune. What on earth? Like, how did this film come to be?
So Mike, Nate, and Carson were the writers of this film. They're Mike and Carson. So Carson's the director. Mike's like one of his best friends from childhood, and Nate is the guy who plays the pitcher on Adler's Paint. They wrote this movie over COVID. And then I got involved, and we were going to originally do this movie in 2021 for a very small budget. And that version of Eephus is way different than whatever you saw. It was very potential that whatever we were going to shoot in those days might have looked more almost like a documentary about rec league baseball opposed to like an actual full-blown narrative film. We got a few more bucks, got a few more names attached, and we pushed a year to make sure we were going to do it the right way. And then we started shooting fall 2022.
Wow, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's kind of funny how this stuff takes a while. From when I signed on August 2021. So yeah, it's been a long time.
How long was the shoot?
We shot it was like a week of prep up there, and then 5 weeks of shooting for principal photography.
Okay. Wow. I guess that would make sense because you have to get so for the folks at home, Eephus is the story of one game of baseball. It is rec league baseball in New England, played between a bunch of guys who are not really good at the game or in shape. It seems like they don't really seem to care whether or not they win or lose. And the game plays out over the course of one afternoon and evening, because at a certain point the sun goes down and they have to play by the headlights on their cars, which is maybe, I guess, a tiny bit of a spoiler. I don't know. Are there spoilers?
Yeah, I mean, it is, but I think if you watch the trailer, you kind of can learn that too.
Yeah, if it's in the trailer, it's not a spoiler. That is the rule on the podcast. So That must have been hell on earth because you would have to film. It's like if you're filming it for 5 weeks, right? But like all your shots are in that twilight golden hour portion. You only have that tiny window to actually get the naturalistic lighting, right?
Yeah, I mean the big headache of this whole movie was sort of like, where's the sun? What's the weather going to be tomorrow? To sort of give you the whole speech about how that went. We shot about 4 weeks of daytime stuff, and then we did a week of nighttime stuff. And like our whole plan was, since it's a continuous day, like the weather's supposed to be the same in the movie. The hope is that it looks somewhat consistent. So we had to wait for it to be like sunny. If we want it to be a sunny day, we could only shoot on sunny days. We're like, great, that'll work out. And then we basically have 3 looks of the movie. There's daytime. We do this kind of dusk look and this night look. And to do the dusk look, we did this technique called like day for night or like day for dusk, where we
Oh
shot
yeah.
during the day and made it like a little bit blue and printed down 2 stops so it kind of looks like it's more dusk. So the plan for that was whenever it's like kind of rainy or cloudy or a gray day, we'll just shoot. We'll shoot the dusk day for dusk stuff on those days. And keep in mind, like we're trying to schedule all this, and like we don't know when the sun's gonna do what. So the whole thing was pretty like fluid. We kind of just sort of like the start of the week would see what the weather looked like. And we did our homework too. We looked at like the Farmer's Almanac and like looked at like the window of dates in the fall where it rains the least and like picked those weeks. And of course, like in Douglas, Massachusetts, it was the rainiest fall Douglas has had in like 30 plus years or something. So we're like, oh man, like when we're planning this thing, we're really worried, like, oh, will we have enough gray days to even shoot all this day for dusk stuff? Because like we originally first talked about like maybe trying to shoot it all at blue hour, and like you were saying, it's never going to work that way. So we ended up doing this day for dusk look. And we were really worried we wouldn't have enough days, and turns out we shot like the first 4 or 5 days were raining, so we got our dusk days done like pretty quickly, and then we're sort of like, well, we need more sunny days. Like if we don't have enough sunny days, like how are we going to shoot this? So we actually ended up, it was supposed to be a week of prep, 4 weeks of shooting, and then a big week of prep and 5 weeks of shooting. We added an extra week because we didn't have enough sunny days, so we had to keep tacking them on.
And it's also a pretty big cast, right? Like this isn't
Yeah,
just
it's like
like
almost
it's like
40
2
people.
dozen people or
Yeah.
something, 3 dozen maybe.
Yeah, I think if you count like all like the random like the shadow boxer and like the construction workers, it's over. I think it's over 40. Yeah, it's a lot of people.
Okay, well, that's a lot. I am so interested in like the construction of this movie. Were there were you privy to any like rewrites on set, anything like that? This kind of stuff happens all the time, and I find it really interesting and sort of like compelling. Especially because I've only seen the final product, right? Like what are some of the big changes you feel like happened because of that sort of process?
Real
Yeah,
quick,
so
before you dive into that, I think it's a great thing to dive into. But I think, um, you know, we people at home might not know exactly what a cinematographer is and what they do
yeah,
on the
I
film.
was
Why
going to
don't you?
explain a
Oh
little bit
yeah,
more
I'm
on that.
sorry.
Yeah,
Listen,
I'll,
I
I'll
don't
do
listen. I'm not going to condescend to our audience, Mango. I think they're smart and they understand what a DP does. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. So just to give a little, I'll catch everybody up on a little bit of like, and the sort of structure of an indie film too. So it's like it's what I'm working on. Like Eephus, if you haven't seen it, is not like it's not like a Marvel movie, right? It's a very modest budget. It's mostly just a bunch of friends trying to make something. We got a decent chunk of money, but like it's not like we're not getting like picture cars and like fancy picture. If we had picture cars, we're not getting like talent doesn't get trailers. There's not like a high end caterer. There wasn't like tons of people. Like it's a shoestring budget kind of thing. You kind of make it work. I'm a cinematographer. I'm the director of photography. It's the same thing. It's the person in charge of the image, right? So on a film like this, it's not so like on a bigger movie. There's like studios involved, and there's hard lines, and there's hierarchies, and there's sort of like um, this is what you do, and this is how you do it, and this is the only people you talk to, kind of thing. On a film like this, it's much more like I'm talking to Carson, and I'm suggesting things that I think would be funny in the movie, and like he's suggesting things he think would look cool for the image, and like Mike, who was one of the writers in the AD, is like it's a huge like any good idea is a good idea. You know what I mean? It's like a big collaboration. It's not so much like the hierarchy, like the director is like God, and like no one can even look at him, kind of thing. It's much more like a sort of like a family event. And I guess what's worth explaining too is Eephus is produced by Omnes Films, which is a collective. The collective is a bunch of friends from college that all work on each other's movies. They've made Eephus was, I think, their fourth film or fourth out of 5 that are out. Hell on Rye is one that Carson Lund, who's the director of Eephus, shot. Carson shoots a lot of their movies. He also shot Christmas Eve in Miller's Point, which is another film that premiered with Eephus at Cannes that was out in November. Also worth checking out. Very funny. So the whole spirit of Omnes is sort of making fun stuff with good people and like collaboration and sort of, you know, creating these things that are outside of the studio, this independent cinema that like is accessible. And sometimes a little different, a little weird. But
I'm
that's sort
sorry. Would you characterize Eephus as an accessible movie?
I mean, like compared to maybe other movies in that budget range of that kind of nature, you know what I mean? Like
Fair
if
enough.
you're looking
Yeah,
at like
sure.
an art house movie, I think you could just watch Eephus if you like baseball, and then you're fine. You know, like go have a laugh. Like some other movies in that kind of category, you watch, and you finish it, and you're like, what did I just watch? Or you have to kind of like work a little bit to sort of understand. Like you can just watch Eephus to watch a baseball game if you wanted to. Anyway, all that whole rant to say, I was very privy to basically everything, for better or for worse, because of the sort of nature of this kind of shoot. So probably the most obvious example of a rewrite that led to something great was the fact that Keith William Richards, who plays Ed, the pitcher for Adler's Paint, we originally had him scheduled for so many days, and then there was a conflict with his agent, another project, and dates changed. And long story short, he had to leave early. So I think we only had him for 2 weeks. So that scene with Wayne Diamond driving him out to go, which is, in my opinion, one of the funniest scenes in the movie, to drive him out of to the christening, that was written like the day or two before as a way to get him out of the movie because we had to write him out of the movie. So that's a good example, sort of like adapting. Another good one is the child. He's in a lot of the prep images. His name is Jack. He's the little boy that talks to Keith again, about he's like, do you play ball, kid? He's like, do yourself a favor, don't. Like, go buy me some smokes. And then the kid's in the woods smoking. That kid we met on one of the pickup days. So after we shot Principal, like 6 months later in the spring, we shot more stuff to sort of help with the edit. And that kid just like that we were waiting for the game on the field to finish because people were playing baseball in the field. And that kid just came wandering up and was like, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like, "We're making a movie." He's like, "Can I be in it?" And we're like, "Yes, absolutely, you could be in this movie." So we shot that scene with him against the fence, and it was very funny. And I mean, that's one of my favorite scenes of the film. And then later at the color session, Carson and I had been talking about the edit, and we were getting a lot of like feedback about how like the scene in the woods with the one Marine kind of having like sort of like a PTSD thing. The one scene that's off the field, it was sort of the only scene that's like a guy by themselves for the most part, without like anyone else besides maybe like the frame entrance and exit. And it was a lot of feedback of like, oh, like maybe we should like do something. And we had this ongoing joke of like all the things we do with Jack, like, oh, like they're gonna have like a buddy cop movie, like him and Keith are become like police officers. There's kind of like, you know, this normal silly bits you do with your friends, and we kept making jokes, and one of them was like, oh, we should have him like smoking a cigarette in the woods, and that was birthed from that, and that we shot that in March of 2024. So his parents drove him down to New York. We shot that in Queens in Forest Park. Shot that scene on like all my gear. We didn't have to, not even like all the official gear we used for the movie. Shot that in the park, and then threw in the movie, and then 2 months later, it premiered at Cannes. So that was like the last thing we shot. But you know, especially this kind of film too. It's like as the edit progresses, you sort of see like we wanted to shorten it. So it's like, okay, here we're in moments we can kind of make this shorter, and you know, you kind of work with what you got, and worth stating, like Jack and all the people that acted in this film, like the only reason why this made it as far as it did is because they all cared so much. Everybody like was on board for the project. Everybody like really was here for it. Everyone kind of gave it their all and was down to make whatever work.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. It makes so much sense. I remember thinking at the time when Ed got out of the movie, I was like, is this going to pay off at some point? And it doesn't. He just
Yeah, he just leaves.
and never comes back. It is just, and yeah, it's just gone. Okay. Mango, I don't know. What's on your mind, buddy?
You know, I've been marinating, obviously not as much as Greg, but you know, I saw this movie a little while ago, and I've seen it again. I don't know what question. I feel like I've asked you 1,000 questions, Greg, about this in our private capacity. Do I have anything?
What's the shot? What are the shots you're really proud of? I counted your rack focuses. That was one. I was next to so because me and Rachel, who's also in the chat, we went to film school, and so when I saw the first one, I was like, oh, that was like on a whole rigmarole to get a rack focus right, kind of thing. And then I think there were 4 of them total. I was like, yeah, buddy, let's go.
Yeah, so I guess like my taste in cinematography, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds and bore your audience here about the specific stuff, but like I think cinematography is like very much so should be discreet, and like it's maybe not the right thing to say in a film that like has some very intentional cinematography, but like things like rack focuses and like lens flares and like we shot this movie pretty close down opposed to like really wide open. I don't love like, especially with anamorphic, the breathing you get from like huge pulls and like big moves and like crazy lens flares. So like I tried to really sort of minimize a lot of that in the movie, because like I think you should be watching the film and like not my cinematography. Like if there's a beautiful shot, sure, or like a movement, that's part of it, but like seeing like I don't know, when there's crazy lens flares that kind of come across the screen, you can't see what's happening. Like that's kind of, I think it works for like sci-fi movies, but I think that's for like this kind of thing incredibly distracting. I'm not really answering a question here. I'm sort of just rambling about
Well,
my
yeah,
opinions,
because it's
but
I totally understand what you're saying, especially because like this is the kind of stuff that draws attention to the camera. I hate who's the you are gonna know this guy immediately. The uh Alejandro Inarritu guy. He's won a million awards, and they do those one shots or whatever, like in
oh
The Revenant and
yeah,
Birdman.
Tyvo, it's Emmanuel Lubinski.
Yeah, I fucking hate this guy. Okay, and part of it is because he draw it, like, to me, it's like flashy. It's like drawing too much attention to the camera. In my world, good cinematography happens when you don't notice this stuff, right? Like if a DP is really doing their job, right? They are not going to. You're never going to notice it. You're going to think, oh, this is great. You're really in the moment. There's cool stuff happening on the screen, but you're never really thinking about like the construction of the movie, which is part of like, I mean, in a wider sense, that tends to be how I think it. Like if I'm noticing stuff in like on like a script level or like an editing level, I'm not in the moment watching the movie
Yeah,
for
you
kind
get
of the
sucked
holistic
out. Yeah.
project. You know what I mean? And I feel like that same thing sort of applies to theoretically to cinematography.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like the big thing for me is lens flares, and like sort of get into a little bit the weeds of like one of the big things. So we shot anamorphic, which is an old sort of technique for shooting. It's something that they did, um, like in the I think 70s and 80s was originated. I could be wrong about that, but the whole concept is that you shoot on a 4:3 image on these lenses that squeeze the image in, that then you stretch back out later. And the whole concept was to get more information opposed to cropping or just getting a smaller piece. You're getting more like resolution, if you will, on film. Um, so that's sort of like a thing that's kind of came back, and like it's way a lot of old Hollywood movies look, um, and it's sort of like what people associate with like cinema, like the big widescreen, right? And Carson was pretty adamant about shooting it when I signed on, and I was like, okay, like I'm not the biggest anamorphic person. I don't always love like what comes with it. A lot of the lenses that are used for that are like old, and like really popular ones are like Loma square fronts, which are old like Russian lenses, or like Kawas. So they shot the Creator on. It was like one Kawa for the most part. And those lenses, like you get a lot of like some of them, depending which ones you have. They have like crazy distortion, and you get like the edges aren't in focus, like they're sharp on the edges, and the top and bottom can even be soft, and like you get those like long streaks, those long lens flares that go across the whole image, and like even some of the Panavision glass too, you get like you don't always get the long streak, but you get these like crazy sort of like flares that stretch out and like will cover people's faces. Like if a light's back here, it'll like actually the streak will come across and interfere with like the person. And to me, that's like I don't want to say it's heinous, but like for most stories, I find that like wildly distracting, and I was watching a movie the other night, and I'm not gonna say what it is because I have a few friends who worked on it. But like,
Listen, you're allowed to. I took a shot at
I'll,
Emmanuel Lubensky, like fucking Oscar-winning cinematographer over here. Okay, buddy,
Alright,
you're allowed to let your hot takes, your spicy takes fly.
but I was watching this movie, and every time it came up, I was like, I can't. It just flares. Like I said it, and my partner, she is a saint for dealing with me. But I just like, it's like flare. Like I can't stop myself because it's just so distracting, and it's like over the person's face. Like I can't see their eyes while they're like having this moment because there's lens flares going on. So all that to say is like I was pretty worried about this film for our budget and like what we were going to use to shoot anamorphic, and part of it is like even the cheaper ones that are more affordable, like people emulate that sort of look, and like one of the big things, it's like one of two things happens. You kind of get this like pin cushioning where it gets pulled in the middle, or like it's this other part where you push to the side and it like warps and stretches. So I mean, you've seen the movie as people cross and we go past all these things. I just was like losing sleep over the fact that like this movie's gonna be unwatchable if like we don't get something that's clean and crisp. And luckily, there's this one set of lenses, master anamorphics, that are incredibly expensive, but are these like crisp, clean images, and because they're so crisp and clean, nobody likes them. So in turn, despite buying them as expensive, renting them is very cheap because nobody wants them. So I did. I wanted them. We ended up getting them for this movie. Um, um, but yeah, that long rant is just to say that like that kind of stuff is sort of important. Like I didn't want those distractions to occur in this kind of film, and I wanted you to like enjoy the people and not be like as somebody crosses, their face gets kind of pulled and like moves around and wildly
Do you
distracted.
do like dailies and stuff like that? Like you theoretically, I mean, are you shooting on film or
No,
digitally?
so this was shot on a Sony Venice 1,
Okay.
which another fun little tidbit. The Sony Venice 2 came out, and I got real excited because I was like, great, the Sony Venice 1 will be like half the price if the two's out. So we shot on the first one. The advantage of the Sony Venice 1, to not to get too technical here, but it has two cards. There's like an extended back to it, and the main card in the camera records all the raw data, which is like the high bit rate, like high resolution stuff that goes to the like editing, and then there's what's called a proxy, which is like lower quality file, and that was recording on this specific camera. Will record to a separate card in the back. So what was nice was at the end of every day, I would take that card and put it on my laptop, and I would take screenshots of every single scene we shot, just like for a couple reasons, but like mostly just to like when we went to shoot something the next day, and it's like, oh, we've got to shoot scene whatever 6D now. Like where was like scene 5B? Where was the sun roughly when we shot this? Because we were shooting this across all these weeks and trying to be somewhat consistent. Um, I had to look at I would look at these screenshots and be like, okay, like where's the sun? So we can roughly do it this time of day. Or more so like because everyone's all over the field, it's like, oh, is there a runner on second in this shot? Like and did we see them in this other shot we did before? Like where's this person supposed to be? So it was sort of like a guide for like continuity of lighting, continuity of actors, and just overall just like a good reference. So that was like our dailies, was me just doing screenshots every at the end of every day. And I would do screenshots, and my AD and director would be working on the schedule, and then I'd come down and be like, cool, let me chime in on the schedule. And we check the weather, and then it would have to change because now it's going to rain, and it just it was a um, every day was sort of like everybody was flexible to sort of like see how this is all going to shake out. So it was a lot of like normally on a movie you would do like 5 days on, 2 days off, or like 6 days on, like 1 day off, and like we weren't able to do that. It was much more like we're gonna work for 6 days, and then we're gonna try and take a day off, and then like we're gonna do like a half a day because it's gonna rain for half the day, and then we're gonna take 2 days off, and then shoot for like 5. And so it was sort of like all over the place. And I guess what's worth like praising here is the fact that like because um, Carson and Omes like creates this sort of environment, and like we hire a lot of our friends, and like a lot of the crew is people I've known for a long time and work with, like, and a lot of the actors are people they worked with a lot. Like it creates this environment that people are just like down to help and like okay to be flexible. And like I can't say enough good things about the cast. Like it would rain and the field would be messed up, and they would be out there like digging out the sand so it was playable, and like making the field like able to work. And like they were there before I was, making sure the field was good. So this film's always a collaboration, but this specifically, like, I think is doing well. And like we the reason I'm even talking to you about this is because there was so many people that like gave it their all for the whole time we were involved.
Okay, yeah. Well, so unfortunately, you did not, in fact, answer my question. I
That's
complimented
all
you
right.
on your rack focuses, and we got down this rabbit hole. But what are the shots you want to like brag about?
Um, Shots I want to brag about. I mean, there's a lot of like cool dolly shots that like are like pretty long advanced takes. I like some of the Steadicam stuff too. I think we did a good use of like there's like one handheld sequence which I think kind of really helps like that feel. It's like when there's a tension moment when um Graham is arguing with Ray um at the third base. They're kind of bickering back and forth. I really love one of my favorite shots of the film is at the end when it's Franny in the box kind of reading off quotes and all the cars are moving and it's like just he's got one it's lit by literally one light just kind of hitting him and you see his breath. That's one I really love. I love all like the ensemble, like the people are so interesting. Like there's a lot of stuff with like the catcher and the ump that I like. That like there's some really great shots that like you see. There's one specifically of John the catcher, and it's like him and the umps right behind him that I love, like because the masks and like the depth there. Um, there's like a lot of shots that are cool. At this point, I've seen this so many times and like been so long that I'm sort of like the excitement I had for some of it has sort of wavered. And like just to put in perspective, I've watched the movie like 2.5 times this weekend on the tour. Like I was there for the casted cast commentary for the Blu-ray, so I watched it as they talked over it. Like we had a screening. There's been screenings every night, but I was only at the screening yesterday and the day before, so I've like seen a lot of it recently. So just been a lot of Eephus. So my enthusiasm for like, oh, my favorite shot has sort of wavered since I shot it 3 years ago or whatever at this point.
Okay. Well, what about Eephus like attracted you sort of as a project? Are you a baseball guy? Was it baseball?
Well, this is fun. So Mike and I grew up playing baseball. I can
Yeah.
talk about the brotherly baseball here, like little league and stuff. And then I stopped playing around like middle school. But I think my favorite best baseball memories was actually Mike's friends would do pickup baseball, and it was a mix of Mike's friends and my friends. But there was this sort of thing that I think you were the first one that brought me there, Mike, if not one of my friends. But my friends started coming later. But
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it was like end of high school, beginning of college when we'd be back.
Yeah,
But
like junior. I'm a grade younger than Mike, so it was my junior senior year. We would do this sort of like go play. It was actually like had so much fun doing it because it was not like all the people who like were like really good at sports and took baseball really seriously played baseball. But then there was this like other group of kids in our town that like were into sports but like weren't that good or like didn't play on the team or like didn't make the team or whatever. We do these like pickup games at little league fields where you could only use a little league bat. So like you like
but our
on a
aluminum
12
little
person.
league bats, so we could
Yeah.
fucking crank them. It was fucking
You could
amazing.
like, but like I think there was only like a couple of home runs in like the like many games we played because it's not enough force, right? No one's throwing the
Right.
ball hard enough. The bats aren't heavy enough for it to really
Yeah, the
go
bats they've got to be like those like
heavier.
25 inchers. You know what I mean? Like very short compared to
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you could still get a good whack out of it, but like not like every at bat was a home run. But that was very fun, and to me that was very much so this like a lot of shit talking, like a lot of like people just screwing up plays, and I guess to wrap that towards Eephus, like I think originally when we talked about the film, like what's worth mentioning too with all this, like when we pushed that year, like about once a week for a year, me, Mike, and Carson got on a Zoom call and just talked about the movie for like 2-3 hours at a time, once a week for a year. Sometimes it would be like somebody would have something and we'd skip a week, but then we'd have like 2 meetings the next week or a longer meeting or whatever. So we sort of like talked about this to nauseum about every shot, every little thing. Like we had whole meetings about like what color the brim should be on the inside of the hat because it's going to bounce light back into their face. Like we did like a bunch of camera testing to see what would make sense. But in the process of talking about this, I think when we originally discussed the movie, the idea was that like the baseball was good, right? That like not that like everything was perfect, but that the level was maybe a little higher than it is in the movie currently, and that's because like some of the actors were maybe not as good at baseball as they let on. Others actors were maybe brought on because they were like a bigger name, but maybe weren't as good at baseball. There's a sort of a range of like everyone's skills, and Carson was holding like rehearsals, which were basically just baseball practices, having these people like practice throwing the ball and like what you would do and how you would be a first baseman or like a third baseman, like which way you turn and like where you put your feet and like. I watched these dudes play baseball every day for 6 weeks, and they got better by the end of it, which is also very funny because every day they're doing it. And another thing that somebody pointed this out to me the other night, which I thought was very funny. If you're gonna play in the MLB, right? Like given these guys aren't in the MLB, but like if you're gonna play in a baseball game, you're gonna pitch, right? You pitch a game, and then you don't pitch for a week, right? You throw your heart out, you take your time off, like you recover. The pitchers in this movie were pitching every day. Like
Oh my god.
Pridemore, the guy who's on River Dogs, every single day was throwing the ball, and like he's not a professional athlete. Like he doesn't have a team of people, and like doesn't have years of being a pitcher. Um, he just did it. So that's sort of part of it too. And I think that's sort of the charm is that it's not perfect. And I think when we first started realizing how the baseball was going to go, I think there was a little bit of frustration for like, maybe that those first few moments. Then we started seeing the footage, like, oh wait, this actually makes it like way better. Like it's way funnier. It's way more charming. It's like more realistic, and it's also like it sort of just hits home that point that like this really doesn't matter, which is sort of like a through line of
Yeah.
a theme of the game.
It felt like a rec baseball game, right? Like like you said, we used to play baseball in high school. It felt like I was, either back at one of those games or back at one of my little league games, right? Obviously, I don't play adult recreational baseball, but you get a lot of those vibes.
What was your position in Little League?
Me? Oh,
yeah. Were you good?
Left field. No, I was terrible.
Oh. I was a third base king. I hit a lot of triples, but I could never convert. I never hit a home run in Little League, but I hit a lot of triples, and it was just because I was really slow. So like
no. Similarly, I could like reliably get a couple of hits, and I was I am left-handed, so like I guess that like threw off the other little league pitchers. So I don't know if you remember this, Greg, but like in like middle school, my coach called me Mr. RBI, which I thought was like totally unearned, but it made me feel good.
Nice. I don't remember that.
But yeah, no, it's great.
Do you think of like baseball as like America's game? So part of this, I'm coming from this from a certain perspective. I watched a YouTube video by Derpy Award winner Patrick H. Willems from a long time ago. He's a film YouTuber in New York City. He made a video once. He made the case that baseball makes for the best cinema, right? If you are going to make a sports movie, you ought to make it about baseball because baseball is just the best at delivering, whatever movie making, magic.
Yeah.
Which I thought, referring to anyone by the fact that they won a Derpy as well, he's probably won multiple of them, to be fair, because I like his work a lot. Anyway, he made this case that baseball is the best, is like the best movie sport, talking about stuff like hockey. I like hockey, but hockey and football have this issue of the helmets, right? You have this kind of grill that's obstructing players. Hockey and football movies tend not to be about players specifically. They tend to be about coaches, because with coaches you can emote, right? And the plays are a little bit more sort of like explosive, especially in football, right? Like you kind of have these big explosions of action that then get cut sort of short. Whereas with baseball, right, like the pitcher and the batter, you can clearly see their face. They're in this like Wild West sort of showdown. All of the rest of it. Do you feel any of that kind of stuff? Do you feel like if you were going to make another sports movie, it would be inherently inferior to Eephus because it's not about, the greatest American pastime?
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about this a bunch when we were making the movie, and I've since have fielded this question a couple times, and I think the things that sort of like hit home for me about why baseball is so good to film and like it's so cinematic is a couple things. Like one, like baseball is like I think truly the only sport, like team sport, where most people are just waiting for something to happen. Like you could be playing one of the positions and not do anything the entire game, right? It's possible if you're like a right fielder and there's no lefties, or like no one just hits it there, you just don't do anything, or like whatever, any position. It doesn't have to be just right
Like a
fielder,
perfect game of baseball is where nothing happens, where it's just like straight pitches,
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah, yep. It is just
and like
strikeouts.
and like you just don't know how a game's gonna go. So like I guess part of that is that like everyone's having their own sort of like thing going on, and there's so much space between people. Like a sport like hockey or like football, like those are like the pacing's a little bit different, but for the most part, it's people moving in chunks. You know what I mean? Like it's like big groups of people going in a direction, or like everyone's sort of chasing the ball. And in baseball, it is obviously all about the ball. Where the ball goes dictates how the play unfolds. But like in football, the ball, the whole thing is to get the ball, right? And in baseball, it's one person's job to like stay away from the ball, right? In some ways, like not truly, but like to not get touched by it or get.
No, I totally
touched
understand
out.
this. This is something I was thinking about for sure. So, for instance, if I'm filming a hockey movie, right, so much of my shots, they all have to be these super, super wide long shots, because you have to get, like if you think about the way somebody would film, um, you can't get close, because then you lose your sense of sort of geography and
Yeah.
geometry, right? Because at the end of the day, all of that stuff is so fluid when it comes to something like soccer or hockey, where it's just a bunch of people who are all trying to get possession of this one object at any individual time. Hockey looks good on a wide shot because you can kind of see the grace of these, like of these people all moving together, tracking sort of the thing. But in baseball, I feel like you have this incredible ability to structure your shots so much differently, because you can get really close on a pitcher, right? The dynamic between the batter cracking the ball already creates two fields of interesting, compelling motion, right? Number one, he has to make it to first base. Number two, the guy who's catching the ball has to throw it in. That's like, it's almost like an A plot and a B plot from like a sitcom. That you can't do that stuff in basically any other sport I could
Yeah.
think of, just because like the nature of every other sport is so singularly focused on whatever
The
the
point
thing
of
is
action.
that
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
driving
and
the
like
action.
like
Yeah.
football, right? Like it's like there's waiting, right? There's those breaks, like this explosiveness, but then there's these periods of waiting, like kind of like baseball. But when they're waiting, everyone's together, right? When the action's happening, that's when like a runner goes further, or a wide receiver is like that's when the separation happens, or a big throw. It's like the action's happening, and you're following the ball, like it's when the big moments are happening. Where baseball, you have all these things where it's like when the moment isn't happening, everyone's spread out, right? And like almost the crack is what brings people back, right? You're off like in whatever position, like looking at the grass, or like the clouds as is in the movie, and or the guy who's shadow boxing behind the wall, and you're like, what's going on over there? And then you hear something happening, you get brought right back into it. So I mean, that's sort of like what the idea was behind the movie, and given this is more of like Carson, Mike, and Nate's sort of like, or really Carson's take on baseball. He's the big baseball guy, of just sort of like wanting to capture these all the things that are happening outside of the baseball. And I think that's why people that's why some people are resonating. This film's resonating with them, is the fact that like it's not just about baseball. Like people can watch this movie and be like, I love baseball. And we've been on this tour, and I've been talking to people who are like just diehard baseball fans. Like in Albany this week, it was a baseball team that set that whole thing up. Like it was a bunch of baseball players. They like came in their uniforms, like they were all stoked because they love baseball. But then there's people who like don't give a fuck about baseball, and like they want to laugh at the jokes, and like are enjoying the like little bits that aren't about the baseball. And that's sort of like what's been so fun about this, and what was cool shooting, and why I think people are enjoying it that aren't just baseball fans, is the fact that it's like we're showing a lot of not the baseball with the shooting too. That's sort of like the moments in between, if you will.
Yeah, you're showing the whole game, or like the whole surrounding atmosphere, which is what I think makes it feel so real, right? Like like the thing I referenced at the beginning, the Italian Hoagie opera, like not exact, like like the snack bar with that's happening in the background. That's not maybe exactly that happens at every baseball game, but it feels like something that's like part of like the aura around it, rather than just kind of like the action on the field.
Yeah. Actually, I want to ask you this. I want to ask this before, but Mike saw it the first time at the friends and family screening. That was I guess that was the first showing of the like what is now the finished cut. That was the first like public eyes on the completed movie. But that was, I still think that was the color was mostly done, but the mix wasn't done. So I'm curious, when you heard it. I didn't go to the screening you went to, so I have no idea how the theater was. But when I heard it again after that screening, and like I've watched it so many times, I started hearing way more lines because the mix was better and certain things kind of popped. Did you feel like when you watched it this most recent time, you could hear more, and like the some of the moments hit better?
Yeah, I think so. The thing I was listening for, and I heard it this time, and maybe it was because of the mix, maybe it was just because I was listening to it, is identifying Graham as the guy on the radio, like that they, identifying that he's the guy that's responsible for the field being torn down, was something I only knew the first time because you had told me. And because that line's only on the radio, and it's a little bit tougher to make the connection. But when I was listening for it, I heard it. I'm actually curious, buddy. Did you pick up on that?
I picked up on that, but I didn't get the detail. What are the details of that? All I understood is that everybody was shitting on him for this thing.
Well, the details aren't really that important, right? Right?
Okay, yeah.
And that's sort of the thing too, is like it's not that, I don't know. I think that's sort of the beauty of the movie, is that it's not that important that the field's even like the field's going away, but it doesn't even matter really why. And also like that
Honestly,
he's
the
part
most
of it.
relatable part of that fucking movie is when they're like, "Oh, why don't you just go to?" And they name the other field, and
That's
somebody's
this.
like, "It's half an hour away. I'm not doing that." It's like, it's like, yes, that's me. I get that. I get that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's like part of it too, right? It's like such a simple obstacle is like why some of these guys will never play baseball again. Like, oh, Dustus smells like shit. We're not going there, or like it's too far. So that's it. Just gonna instead of like driving 20 minutes, 30 minutes to go to do the thing I like, I'm just gonna like hang up the pads
I
and call
also
it
think
quits
that's like
on.
a unique thing. Like you can't have a pickup game of like hockey. You can't have a pickup game of football in the same way that I feel like you can have a pickup game of baseball. Like there's that whole bit at the end where they keep losing the balls in the dark and they're just like, we have to find them. We didn't bring a bucket of balls or whatever. Like that's a really relatable kind of just like a bunch of guys show up to spend their afternoon playing this baseball game together kind of thing.
Well, but I think that is part of it too, right? Is like you can do pick up baseball, but like it has to be on a diamond, right? Like you can play soccer in a field, right? You can play
That's true.
street hockey in the street, right? Which is a slightly different thing, but you have to have a field to play baseball, right? Like you have to have the proper markings, I guess. It's a harder thing to kind of do without some
Yeah,
setup.
it's not as easy as like going to play basketball where like one person needs a basketball and you just go to like you just need a hoop, right? That's a
Yeah.
little bit simpler. But with baseball, it's like everyone has to have a glove and you have to have a couple of balls and you have to have a diamond and someone needs to bring at least one bat. But like it's a little like I mean and
And
it's
then there's
funny.
the umpire. There's that whole thing with the umpire leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's been fun too because we've done quite a few pickup baseball games with the cast and crew over the course of this,
Are you
and like
good?
even
Did you school them? Did you strike anybody out?
I'm not a pitcher, but I'm one of the better batters for sure.
Really? Okay.
I'm like I can hit, and I can feel decently too. The last pickup game I didn't do great, but the games we played up there. I mean, we played baseball like at lunch every day. Like the day would end and we'd hit a couple balls. The day started with everybody playing catch. Like not necessarily me, but all the actors would warm up because they had so that like Carson's talked about this a bunch, but he's like part coach. You know what I mean? Like that's a lot of like he had a glove in his hand a lot of the time. He had like a handheld monitor he'd put down and like put the glove on or hold the monitor in the glove and like put the monitor down and like okay, here's how like you field the ball, like here's how you throw it, and like little known fact, I mean, anytime the ball kind of like lands somewhere, he's usually throwing it. Or even like there's a scene at the end where they're stealing third, um, and it's a dolly shot with him, and it throws, and he gets. They have this moment, but Carson's the catcher. He's wearing the gear. He's like, I need to throw it. Like we don't have time to one hit the camera with a baseball, two like not to get this, and it was cold, and this dude's sliding, and it's like he's like I'm just gonna do it because I know I'll nail the throw. So that's part of it too. It's like there's every day we were just playing baseball.
Okay. Can you tell me who the fuck this guy is? Bill Spaceman Lee? Is that what his name is?
Yeah, Billy,
He
Bill the
shows up in the
Spaceman
middle
Lee.
of the movie. I was like, who the fuck is this guy? And then at the end, Grango, you told me that he's like a famous baseball
Because
player, and I was like,
He's a
I've
famous
never heard
Red
this.
Sox player.
Okay.
It's not like if you're a hardcore enough baseball fan, you'll definitely know him. But he's like it's more of like a New England legend than anything. He's in the Red Sox Hall of Fame, but he's not in like the Baseball Hall of Fame, I believe. Um, so Bill's a crazy guy. He's very funny. Bill was actually signed on to this project before I was. He was just down. Carson wanted to have him on because the Eephus pitch for those who don't know is a very specific type of pitch. It's like this slow kind of arc ball that goes so slow that it screws people up. It's not very popular. It's kind of looked at as like a trick pitch or like kind of like a cheesy pitch to throw. And that's Billy's pitch. People refer to it as the Eephus. So like when talking about, somebody made one other baseball movie that he's in that's Eephus adjacent ish, but it's not like our film. I haven't seen it, but from what I'm told, it's not like it.
I think it's called
But
Spaceman.
yeah, he mentioned it at the Q&A the other day. It's actually the first time I heard about it. and he said that nobody watched it. But Bill's a pretty interesting dude. So Carson was like, if we're gonna make this movie in New England about New England baseball called Eephus, we have to get Bill Lee. Like it's part of it. So he kept trying to find him and trying to find his email and like try to like find a person to connect with him, and it wasn't having any luck. So he just got a phone book and looked up Bill Lee in the phone book and like called his house in Vermont, and like that's how he, he got Bill Lee.
There are
Left him a
honestly
message.
the most surprising part about that is that there are still phone books. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it might have been like yellowpages.com, whatever it was. He looked him up
Yeah.
in like the public phone book, and I think he called him a couple times, but when he finally got him, it was like they just had like a phone correspondence, and Bill was like absolutely down. And yeah, he was signed on before I was. So yeah, he's been on it for the whole ride. Bill is quite the character. He currently pitches for the Savannah Bananas, which is basically the baseball Globetrotters. Um, yeah, so he still pitches. He's died 3 times on the mound for the Savannah Bananas. He had like the last time when we were shooting right before, I think it was a heart attack, um, and they brought him back, and he came to the set and was telling me all about it and telling all of us all about it, and then he was showing me his like do not resuscitate card because he's like I'm on borrowed time, like I should be dead. The first time he pitched after that was on Eephus. But yeah, he showed up in his Savannah's uniform and like was gonna wear that. Or like, no, we have like a costume for you. Like, no, like this is fine. Also, like he got given like a script and lines, and he didn't use a single one of them in the movie. That's just him. Everything he says is just him. Like that's just who he is. All those bits. Is just
Like,
that guy.
I would say
going.
one of the running jokes is he keeps like being like, "Yeah, I used to play," right, and like nobody recognized him. And I guess that's it. Like I only knew who he was because you told me. But if you don't know who he is, it's like what is the joke here, right? But I don't know. It felt to me at least it gave the kind of like maybe I should know who this person is type of thing, right?
I think also like what's in the filmmaking that interests Carson and sort of what they're going for, and like what we talked about so much with this sort of stuff is like a lot of it in this kind of movie in general is like you don't want to you want to like challenge the audience a little bit, and like you don't need like the I don't think at least that like not knowing who Bill Lee is doesn't change anything. It's sort of like
Sure.
this sort of funny guy that kind of comes out of the woods, and I think the idea of this sort of filmmaking and the intent is that like the more you watch it, the more things you pick up on. Like there's just like more layers of depth to it than maybe on a first watch or like
Yeah, there are
that's
fucking
perceived.
layers, Mango.
Yeah.
You idiots. Okay.
But I mean, like 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 not knowing ability, I don't think matters. Like that
Yeah,
dude
fair.
comes out and says a bunch of ridiculous shit, and it's still funny. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
uh,
And I also bet that if you're the guy who recognizes that it's Bill Lee, you are insufferable in the ride home from this movie. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just like talking about this crazy guy and his weird pitch that is like the thematic underpinning of the whole movie, right? Like
yeah, and I mean there is like a bunch of other sort of like characters in the film that like I mean Frederick Weissman's a voice early on in the movie. Like we tried to cast him as Franny, but that ended up not happening because of his age, and Cliff just crushed it. But Frederick Weissman's like this like famous documentarian, and like there's just putting other people in places, and there's a the guy who I'm blanking on his name, but the guy who the pizza truck guy, that is a Red Sox announcer. He's like the voice of the Red Sox on the radio. And the main reason that Carson wanted him to be the pizza guy and sort of like have all those like ingredients and stuff is the fact that when Carson was growing up, he was the voice of like all like the Shaw's commercials, and he'd be reading off like things that were on sale and listing foods. So that was like why that made it into the movie, because he just has this dude's voice in his head listing off foods from around baseball. So that's the ads they'd play like between innings. So like there's like that's part of it too. You know what I mean? Like, and you don't know. Did you guys know who that dude was?
No.
nope, never in a
Did
million
it
years
make
would
the
I have
pizza
guessed
thing any
that.
less funny? You know
No,
what I mean?
no.
Like,
You know,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No.
So I mean, like,
Now that you mentioned it,
there's
go on. Finish your thoughts. Sorry.
the last bit I was gonna say is they do things across their movies too. Like, my gaffer Ryan Apetitano, it was the gaffer on Ham on Rye, which is their first movie as a collective. And in one of the scenes in that movie, there's like this toy shark, and he took it from the set and put it in his truck, and it's been in his truck for like 6 years. And then they took the shark out of his truck and put it in the pizza scene, just sitting on the counter. So like there's like little Easter eggs and layers, and if anyone's really interested, you could go through all these movies and try to like find these sort of like crossover things. So I think it's great filmmaking, and if you're privy to it, it's very funny, and if you're not privy to it, you can kind of catch some stuff sometimes. But yeah,
I was gonna say, you mentioned the ads, just pinged to my mind. I loved the radio commercials, like the radio commercial for the local restaurant. It just felt so real. It's like, come down to a restaurant. The steak dips were great, right? Like, it felt like something I'd seen on, like, the television or heard on the radio growing up. But it's really great at hitting that kind of like nostalgic, like.
Do you feel
point.
like this captures like a sense of Americana that's kind of lost? You and I have talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, Manga, right? Like the kind of radical revolution that the video games we talk about every week represent, right? This is kind of a like dinosaur compared to sort of that. For instance, Eephus, it made in 70 years will be made about like recreational League of Legends players, and I'm sure it will be just as dated at the same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it definitely captures a spirit from like maybe that ended like 20, 30 years ago. I think part of that too, right? Like just to hone in on the radio thing is like people don't do that anymore because it makes more sense for them to just like pay to be like the top result on Google Maps, search for pizza or whatever, right? Like instead of like going through the effort of like doing like a poorly shot 30-second commercial on local access television, or at least that's my experience. I don't watch a ton of TV anymore, so maybe they're all over that and I'm just not paying attention.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know when the last time I listened to like a real radio station is, and I don't know when the last time I watched like a real, maybe when I went to the doctor's office. I was watching like a television in like the lounge or whatever. It's like the last time I watched like a real television commercial.
Yeah. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah.
Do you think this captures the spirit of Lost Americana?
yeah. I mean, that's like I think the hope. Like part of it is like the reason it's a period piece is to not have phones. You know what I mean? Like I think the story, like any
I'm sorry. Hold the fuck up. This shit was a period piece.
yeah,
I didn't even think about it, to be honest with you.
1994.
What is sort of timeless?
Is the exact year.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean the big point of it is not to have phones because like in some ways it just like changes a lot. People looking at their phones, it just changes all sorts of things. Like you wouldn't have the radio, you just play music on your phone or whatever. They could just like you would get a call about the christening or a text, or like they could just text their wives that they were going to be late. You know what I mean? Like it with having that layer of like removing the technology, it sort of like makes the situation a little bit more specific. Yeah, I think the hope is to tap into some of that nostalgia. I know like a lot of the attempt with the jerseys and some of the logos and like it's very like New England heavy obviously, and like some of the advertisements on the back wall, like the ground round, like are very specific like older 90s era stuff.
Yeah, I think when we were leaving the movie, someone made the joke the only way it could be more New England is if they had a Dunkin' Donuts cup somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Narragansett, they're actually a sponsor. Like they gave us all that beer. Like they're great. They were awesome. Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Is that like a New England beer? I've never heard
Yeah,
of
it's
this
a Rhode
before.
Island beer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Narragansett, yeah.
I would say you don't really drink, buddy, so it's not like you would.
That's also true and very fair.
It's funny because it's a local beer, but it's not like it's like a mass. It's like local, but it's like mass enough that like it's not like it's a craft beer. It's not like somebody's coming up from like the Southwest to be like, oh, what's the local beers like in New England and Narragansett, right? It's like kind of
Narragansett.
Yeah, I mean,
like going to Los Angeles, being like, "What's with the local beer?" Oh, Bud Light. Like,
yeah. It's people like people die on the hill of like it's better than Bud Light, but it's in that category of drink.
Yeah, it's kind of like Natty Bo, if you remember when we were
exactly.
in Baltimore. Yeah,
I do remember National Bohemian. Right?
Yeah, National Bohemian beer. Yeah,
yeah.
But yeah,
it's the beer they drink in Jaws.
Narragansett.
Oh yeah, because that was in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah,
Jaws is set
Based
theoretically
off New Jersey story.
It's on a New Jersey story. Really?
It's based on a story from New Jersey. Yeah.
Oh, I actually did not know
They
that.
place it in New England.
All the shark, I guess, eating people. Who knew?
All the actors in Eephus were relatively local, right? Or at least the vast majority of them.
Yeah. So a lot of them are like some of them was their first time acting, like some was like somebody's friend or like everyone was casted for like a specific reason. That nobody was like just like, yeah, you want to be in this movie. The people who hadn't done a lot of acting before, or maybe people who were like um somebody's friend, or like that Carson or Mike had known for a long time, and they had them in their head when they were writing it. Or like, but yeah, for the most part, it's mostly New England people. We had some. One of the actors is two of the actors live in LA, but one of them is like a friend from college, and the other one is a person that's been in a bunch of the Omnes movies. Um, so he's got a smaller role, but he came out for that because he's trying to get his through line across the films. But it's like they do a lot of like working with the same people kind of thing.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated about the actors is the sense that there is more to these people's relations. Like the best version of this is the fucking Italian guy who is so mad, and they are all just fucking with him because he's on his diet or whatever. That is like if somebody were to film like a maybe the best for like a Magic the Gathering session with like me and Mango and like Josh or whomever, right? And then like I pulled out my Eureka deck, and you guys are like, "Oh my fucking, I hate this." You know, it's like it's that feeling of like walking into sort of a situation with no exposition or context clues, but you understand sort of the texture of the friendship. I really loved it. I really loved that. That felt really close to home.
Yeah, and what's actually one of my favorite parts about that character specifically is you learn that right when the sun's setting, he talks about how he's like, my son's at home. He's like, he's waiting for me. Like he's pissed because he's supposed to be home to his kid. He's like actually a good dude. He's not just being a mad dude for no reason. He's got like there's logic behind it. So it's like revealed, like if you catch that beat, it's like, oh, like he's doesn't want to disappoint his son.
Yeah. No, I
Still gets fucked with.
yeah.
Yeah, true. Was the ending always planned? This is where we're deep in spoiler territory. Was the ending always planned that way in the very first versions of the script? No. Interesting. Okay.
So the original ending was the shot of Graham staring out into the field as the fireworks were going off. And we talked about this a lot. This was one of my early edit notes was talking about maybe switching this and kind of doing the bookend. And we chatted and sort of like they made a cut and we tested it with some people and wrestled over it. And my big push forward, like what my thought was when you put Franny at the end and sort of switched where it was, it makes it not about Graham. It sort of makes it like, and it sort of like brings the whole thing together. And it's not it makes the movie sadder in some ways too. And then like kind of opens up some. You could have some rogue fan theories about what's actually happening, right? If like this guy's coming out of the woods and going back into the woods, like what's actually happening, which I always find fun. But I think the idea is with where we ended up with the ending and sort of getting to this place was kind of like keeping it a little bit more open ended and like lets people sort of think and like let each viewer sort of have sort of their own idea about what the film's about, opposed to like having it with just Graham. It kind of pushes it more in a specific direction of like this is what the message is, opposed to sort of like having you reflect on maybe more of the themes than just one.
Yeah, I think the book ending definitely works because that was the first thing I was thinking about. But also, Franny is actually the most important plot relevant character because he calls that final pitch, right? For people who haven't seen the movie, the ending of Eephus, okay, this is the deep
I
spoilers.
was
Go
going to
see
say,
it.
like, basically, everybody listening to this will have not seen Eephus except for the four people.
Yeah, I am now going to explain the ending of Eephus. They get to the bottom of the ninth, and the umpires have left, and so the guy who is just like the scorekeeper, basically, whose name is Franny, clearly just loves the game, is this like cute, hunched over little old man. Okay, he's up in the press box, and he is calling these pitches in pitch black darkness, and they get to the bottom of the ninth, and it is a full count, and if it is a strike, then I guess it would push into the 10th inning at that point.
Yeah.
Technically.
Keep playing.
But if it's a ball, the bases are loaded and you would get a walk-in home run, right? Which is probably the most anticlimactic way to like end a baseball game. And that final pitch comes in, and it is impossible to see any of this stuff because it is pitch black. and he calls the ball. He calls it a ball, and the one team, I guess Adler's Paint wins over the River Dogs, and I don't know. I got it. I immediately I was like, oh, I get it, right? Like the anticlimax is sort of the point in a way, right? Like you can't have this isn't the movie where it ends with a big gigantic grand slam at the bot, like all of the it's like, no, of course he's not gonna be able to hit the ball kind of thing, right? And like the thing that Rachel said as we were walking back to the car was about how this is sort of the cinematic version of that Eephus pitch, right? That's just like it just kind of doesn't resolve the way that you think it's going to. Anyway, I thought that was a very interesting choice. I was really into that. So yeah.
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 I would say my immediate reaction was that you guys could have like cut the ending right at when Franny says I'm the luckiest man in the world or whatever. You could have like cut it there. I think it works both ways, but that was just in my mind. I expected, even this time, knowing that it didn't cut there, I was expecting it to just like fade to black at that moment because it just feels like like the conclusion of a sentence.
I think I would probably say that's the best shot in the movie, to be honest with you, when Franny says that, because that's also the shot where he is where sort of the carbon dioxide from his breath is hitting the light, but he's in all shadow, so he's kind of a silhouette, but then you see the white. You know what I mean? I think that's a great shot. I would have cut it there. Okay, listen, Carson Lund, hire me, okay, to edit your fucking movie. All right, Some Derps talk about Eephus.
What did you say, Greg? That was one light.
We used one light to shoot that shot. 1/650 down low. Yeah, I mean, I think like I know I can't speak for Carson here as like I don't know.
Sure.
He would maybe defend this or say it in a different way, but in my mind, I think it's I think if you cut it there too, it sort of doesn't like let you sit with it for a minute. You know what I mean? That's kind of like that's really putting a bow on it. And I think part of the intent is to like
explicitly not put a bow on it.
That's the Hollywood ending in some ways. You know what I mean? Like
no, that makes sense.
That is the Hollywood ending, man.
It's like true. Like and they had the game ended.
Bitch.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, like even if like if the same thing like with the anti-climactic ending, right? If they hit the ball and it was just a single, it's the same outcome, right? And then you could have him say that, and then you fade it black, and that's maybe like what you would see in maybe a more normal film or like a more studio Hollywood kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or I think this was the attempt at least was to try something a little different and sort of.
Or you end on the fireworks, not on them being launched, and you are watching Graham watch the fireworks off screen, but you end on the big fireworks display, right? Like you have whatever, you point the camera up into the sky. That would be that's like the Hollywood ending. Yeah.
So this is a very stupid question, but. You didn't actually launch fireworks, right? Those were like sound effects and colored lights.
Oh no, we got like 300 fireworks. Yeah, no, they're lights. The RE Sky panel has a fireworks setting. You just click it and you just pick how fast you want it to go.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually really loved Franny. Franny reminds me of Steven Soderbergh said this, right? Process that part of one of the best feelings in film is filming someone's process, right? Like a normal everyday person who's just doing a thing that they do every day, and you just get to kind of like film it. And I feel like that was very true for him. I actually don't think I liked the title cards all that much, but what I really liked was watching him sort of making the notations on what each pitch or what each batter, did they get struck out? Did they walk? Yeah. Like whatever else kind of thing. Even the thing in the beginning where he's like fucking around with that stupid little desk. It's just like, that's like a really relatable. That's a really relatable thing.
The few funny things to point out about that. The first one is more movie magic, but him running the score, that's actually my girlfriend in my apartment. We filmed that here. Just as it's different hands. But the table and some of those lines. So Franny is like Cliff is an excellent actor. He's in a lot of the Omne stuff. He's one of the more through line actors across a couple of their projects. I don't know if he brought the table, but he brought all those things for the table, like the little cup that he spits the sunflower seeds in, and like the binoculars he brought, and like the idea with the lines. he looked up those lines, and we had a mic on him most of the time. He would just be like, he would just be up in the box saying those lines, like he would be saying I'm like the quotes, just doing it. Because that, and he would say his lines to the like he was in it. Even if we're shooting something completely different, he wasn't even on camera. He was just in it the whole time. And the sound guy Joe was just like, yo, he's like, you got to hear this, and like same with the way it works is like Carson has a headset on. He's got all of the, he's listening to what Joe's got mixing. So Joe would send through like Franny up there doing stuff, and it's like we gotta get that. Like that's really good. And sort of like those are what he brought. He brought a lot to the character, and impacted the movie in a huge way. By like just never stopped acting. Like he's just in it the whole time. Same with like there's a funny story with the scene with him peeing behind the sort of like container, like the freight container or whatever, shipping container. We were supposed to film that, and we kept getting delayed because of other stuff, and it took like, we were an hour and a half behind for that shot. So that poor guy held it in for like so long, where we have to do the shot before Freddy explodes. But yeah, that guy's a champ.
Well, have you seen the script for the sequel, Eephus 2?
Eephus 2, no Justice and Justice, and then there's Eephus.
Yeah. Graham comes back, he blows up the school, they play a post-apocalypse baseball game in the ruins.
Yeah.
No Justice and Justice. I like that. Clearly you've been joking about this.
There's been a lot of jokes. I mean, we got however many dudes cast. Like that's the other thing too, is like everyone's here for this project. Like whenever we go anywhere, like so many people show up. Like I'm constantly floored by the support the cast and crew gives it. Because a lot of movies, like the movie ends, you don't talk to them ever again. Or, like people get mad, like that sucked. I don't like this person. So we were just doing the screening, and these guys were telling us like they go bowling like once a month. Like a bunch of them get together and go bowl, and like they hang out. Like they're all friends. Like I mean, I'm friends with all of them. Like we all chat and stuff. We talk, and people reach out. But like they like actively hang out. Like a lot of the thing too is that all the actors stayed in like one house. Like the crew was in one house, and the cast was in this like I think it was called like the Irons. It was like this like Catholic retreat that we rented, and they just all lived in this like these like dorms essentially, and like everybody got along so well, which is like it's not usually the case. So when we premiered at Cannes, we went to France, like a ton of people. I think we had like 40 people in France, and like New York Film Fest, a ton of people showed up. We went on this tour. Everybody keeps showing up. We did a screening at Emerson the other night, and it was like there was like 6 of us doing the Q&A, and then there was like another like 15, 20 people that just showed up to come support and watch. And like I don't know if you guys saw on the tour, but people were like signing autographs and stuff. Like I'm sure a lot of the people were at that screening too. So people keep showing up. We opened in New York this week, and like a bunch of people plan on coming down. So wherever Eephus is, at least on the East Coast, people are, the cast and crew is showing up to show some love.
It was kind of funny. It was before you showed up, buddy. But the restaurant that we ate dinner in before we went to the Concord screening, there was a couple sitting near us talking about, talking about Eephus. It's like, yeah, well, the guy was like, yeah, I've seen it 3 times. It's like I didn't like it the first time, but it grew on me. It's like he was also kind of obnoxious during the screening. Him and his wife were like talking in the front row, so I was a little bit aggravated. But it's
wait, who was? You don't have to tell me on the podcast, but I'm curious who that was.
Just some Concord local, I'm assuming.
I guess it was a guy with a hat who said he was a winemaker.
Okay,
that's Bill Lee.
Wait, was it?
Yeah, no old white guy. Him and his wife talking. From what Billy makes wine, and there's a lot of talk about how him and his wife talk at full volume.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that was Bill Lee.
The movie the first time he watched it.
Oh no, he had no idea what it was about. He thought it was about him. He like no joke. He thought the movie was about him because it's the Eephus, and then he watched it. And he was like, he didn't. I don't know if he got it. And as it keeps going, he's now understanding it.
That's hilarious.
That is actually
that's probably almost guaranteed that was Billy.
That makes sense. That makes sense because that jives with everything else I've heard about him from. Wow. All right. Fantastic.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, listen. Is there more Eephus secrets that we ought to know? Is there anything else you want to brag about while you have the microphone? Like 5-person podcast.
Brag about. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything like to brag about or secrets. Like, there's a lot of like funny stuff. Like, there's some scenes that were cut. Like, there'll be like the Blu-ray will have all the extended scenes and deleted scenes. Like, there's a lot of like funny moments. Like, the first cut I think was almost 2.5 hours long, which was way too long, and they had to get it shorter for anyone to give a shit. But some of the stuff was like very funny that they cut, and like I don't know, some of my favorite moments. A lot of my favorite moments made it in there, but like, just like I think like that's worth just saying is like I had so much fun making this movie. Like I made it with like a bunch of my friends, and like I was laughing constantly on set. Like there was a couple takes. There's one shot where John. It's when the two first basemen. It's Crash. I'm mixing character names and real people's names. It's Bobby uh is on first base, and they're talking about they're having this interaction, and John's at bat, and John comes to first, and um they're chatting, and John yells at him like Bobby, go to second is the line, and Bobby goes, and the first baseman, Pete's the actor's name, I forget his character's name, says like, oh, like John, I like your goatee, and he goes shut up, and like just the way he says it like just got me every time. Like, and I didn't know, the first time we did it, I didn't know he was going to say that, and I don't even know if that was a line in the script, but like I laughed so hard the camera shook, like I screwed up the take. And there was like many situations like that where like it was just very fun, and these people were like making a lot of jokes, and I don't know, it was just such a good spirited thing, which you don't see all the time in this kind of thing, and I hope that comes through in the movie. But you know, if you take anything out of this, making movies with your friends and having a good time hopefully reflects in the film, and it's why it resonates with people. So if you're gonna make something, make it with good people and try to have a good time while doing it.
What
Okay,
genre
well,
do you
yeah.
classify this movie as?
Jesus Christ, that's like the hardest question. Are you
Comedy
kidding?
hangout film. I mean, like, you know,
Oh, that's
comedy
true.
hangout film
What
with
was
like
the
a sprinkle of like try to have some like real life sort of
what was the
themes in there.
the baseball movie that came out a couple of years ago? That I think it was an Oscar contender for God, it was like some guy who I know, and I saw it and I was like, oh man, it's just like the college baseball team.
Everybody
Um
wants some. The Linklater movie.
Everybody wants some. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, that is a good. That's a pretty close, probably the closest you could get to a movie like this in like a mainstream
Yeah.
way
That
would
was
probably be.
that was the last film I watched before we started shooting this. It wasn't a huge reference for Carson because Carson didn't really use baseball movies as references, but my three biggest visual references for this film are for the daytime stuff was Everybody Wants Some, because there's the scene of them playing baseball where it's the college team practicing and nobody's watching. It's like a very, you don't see a lot of baseball where it's no audience.
Yeah.
So that was a reference for me, and just sort of like the way they shot it and the look is in the same realm. The Day for Dusk stuff is Mad Max Fury Road. I took the
No way.
technique they did for their kind of Day for Night stuff and did it with Eephus, just a lot more watered down, not as stylized. And then the third main visual reference for me was the football beach scene in Point Break is lit by cars and fires, but Carson wasn't really down for fires in the field.
Okay, that is quite the trifecta. But I'm a big Point Break enjoyer, so, and I'm also actually a big Mad Max Fury Road enjoyer. So, you know, I'm on board, I guess, for all three of those.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be like, you know, high end art films. Those things are relevant too and important for all filmmaking, but you know, you get some good stuff out of like some more of the standard cinema, if you will.
Yeah.
How is your movie like Captain America 4?
Oh my God, are we doing Captain America? I
don't.
feel like we have to. I haven't seen it. I don't.
Neither have
particularly
I. I don't. I don't want to
see
watch Harrison Ford be Red Hulk. It's supposed to be bad. I just don't care anymore. But
Wow. Okay. Are we giving up? I feel like, honestly, I feel
well, we skipped
more
Craven.
compelled.
We skipped.
Yeah, but this is like a mainline MCU movie. We've done every
Yeah.
mainline MCU movie.
All right, we don't need to waste Greg time with this. We can figure out what
What are your feelings on the Marvel Cinematic Universe? It's like the worst possible question to ask.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I've been playing Marvel Rivals, and that's the only thing that like has had me at all
Listen, this is
like
Derps
entertaining
talking about
Marvel
games,
anything.
okay? Who's your Marvel rivals main?
Winter Soldier, Thor, and I was playing a bunch of Hawkeye, but then they nerfed him, and then he's kind of okay again, but mostly Thor and Winter Soldier.
Mango, have you played any Marvel Rivals?
I played for about an hour, and then I was like, I don't care, and I uninstalled the game.
Yeah, I feel like I will maybe end up playing if my friends make me, right? Like, we have our Mythic Plus crew and they're all playing, and I have resisted the call, but like I feel like as season 2 of World of Warcraft gets going and we're hanging out a bunch more, I bet they're gonna be like, oh, let's go do our Marvel Rivals dailies, and then I'm gonna swap over and I'm gonna actually fucking play a stupid game.
Yeah. I mean, like, I suppose for me, a bunch of my friends were playing it and it was free. I was like, all right, I'll
That
play a
makes
little
sense.
bit.
Have you put any money into it?
Yeah.
Okay. You were always good about like not caring about
I
that
don't care
aspect.
about the skins or the logos. I just want to play the game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care what it looks like or if I've got the cooler
Sure.
emblem than somebody else.
I mean, and I hope I'm not putting you on blast for this, but I also remember like watching you play Destiny, and at some point you being like, "All right, I'm done," and just like turning your Xbox off in like the middle of like a thing with teammates, and it's like, you just do that? It's like, yeah,
Well,
who
if
cares?
I'm playing, if I, like in those days, I was playing with randos, and I was like, I don't give. And this is how it went. That's how when you're one like that was before like Xbox even had the like pickup group stuff. That was like you go to a website and put in your stats, and then someone would like message you on Xbox. So it's like, and then you would just replace them with somebody. Like you do that all the time, and if it was with like my friends, I would never do that. But
You know,
random
sure,
people on the
sure.
internet,
Oh yeah,
those
but
are the
like
first
random
ways.
people, they don't deserve basic courtesies, Greg. Is that what you're telling?
Oh, I mean, have you been in like a pickup group on Xbox? This was like, first off, it's 2016 he's talking about. The things that were happening in this, like there was no courtesy. It was like not like OG Xbox Live days where people were getting real heinous. But it wasn't like not that it's
Oh,
culture
they
now,
start calling
but
you
everybody.
racial slurs.
But
That's like OG Xbox Live, like Halo 2 lobbies, okay?
oh yeah, people just
Like
screaming.
14-year-old kid peeking the shit out of that shitty headset that they included as he just introduces you to every single possible slur for any ethnicity of person that you've
Yeah.
never encountered before.
And then you hear like their mom getting mad in the background because like they're too young to say those things. They do not live by themselves.
Where's that Eephus? Let's make that movie, okay?
Write a script. Let's do it. Honestly, it's probably a lot cheaper to shoot some kid in a basement or like in a room.
Just like a group of kids like in a Halo 3 lobby, doing like God, what was the Halo 3 things? We did rocket launchers and sniper rifles
And sword
in
cancels, like get behind walls and stuff.
Yeah, and there was like was it Blood Gulch? What was that one lobby
Yeah.
everybody always played in? The two really long
Blood Gulch
then
is
there
with the beast on either side.
yeah. That was what we played that all the time. It was just rocket launchers. It was the rocket launchers, sniper rifles, swords in that lobby or in that map. We played about a gazillion hours of that
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I feel like.
That's a cheap film to produce. You need like what? You get 5 kids, 5 bedrooms or 5 rooms, and then you just capture stuff on screen. You can make that for like no money.
Actually, honestly, the hardest part would be getting like the kids to act like early aughts kids instead of like brain rotted Fortnite kids, right? Like
it would be so hard to get them in the mindset for it. I think because it was such a different time.
You'd have to like that's your rehearsals. You just gotta like berate them. You gotta be on the other end of the mic and just bring it out of them.
I would honestly feel like morally really bad if I had to sit down with some like 11-year-old kid and explain to him that yes, in the script it does in fact say, whatever this word. Please don't ever say, but you have to say it like you mean like you can't pussyfoot around it, right? Like you have to go hard. I feel like I would like scar some kids if
The
I
cost
was
of art, man. Gotta crack a few eggs to make an omelet,
That's true. That's true. Listen, I hope they do that movie in your collection. Okay, convince Carson Lund to make Eephus 2 about Xbox 2 or Xbox 360 Halo 2 lobby.
I don't
that was original Xbox,
fairly
right?
sure they're not gonna greenlight that one.
Yeah,
I guess that's true. Yeah.
But hey, if you want to make it, I'll help you make it.
Okay.
You're the creative mind here.
I have a lot of film friends. Okay, in Los Angeles where I no longer live. I have no idea. Are we like on time?
we're at like an hour 20, and so we're like at the point where we move into our weeks, and so I figured Greg talking about video game stuff was about the right thing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah.
What other games and or media have you been consuming? How is your
Games
2 years since you've last been on the podcast been?
Yeah, probably. I played Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That was super fun. Amy and I just downloaded the Takes-Two developers have a new game coming out called Split Fiction. So in preparation for that, we downloaded their old game, which was A Way Out, the prison co-op game, which hasn't been great. It's much more like a slow interactive movie. It Takes-Two is way better in my opinion. They figured it out. But that's been fun. We were doing that. We've put a couple hours into that. Movies. I've been off TV for a minute because I'm trying not to. I don't know. I just like rather watch a movie than like get into a TV series. But let me check my letterbox and see the last few movies I've watched. Let's see. I watched A Complete Unknown. I watched Conclave. I watched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I rewatched Blade Runner 2049. I watched Flow. Bad Trip. I watched Heaven
Maybe
Knows
you
What.
want to watch Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. In that,
I mean, what wouldn't make me want to watch Ace Ventura: Pet Detective?
it's just like fair enough. I guess.
Yeah, you gotta mix. I mean, influence comes from everywhere. You know, you gotta mix them in.
Fair
Point
enough,
Break
yeah.
was the movie I watched recently too. Different Man.
What was you used to say like the 3 best films for like what like Waterworld and like Baby Genius? I don't remember this.
Waterworld is an awesome movie.
So this is the funny thing about this is that this was my film school troll. Was
Okay.
you know everyone wants to talk about their favorite movie. So my favorite movies in film school were Point Break, Waterworld, and Baby Geniuses 2. And the nice thing was the visual referencing I just gave you guys about my 3 movies. I got to say at Emerson when we did the Q&A last weekend or a couple days ago. So I got to go full circle with my my movie troll to tell a room full of young students to watch Point Break as because it'll be an influence.
What's your
for
favorite movie,
movies.
Mango? What's your favorite movie? Actually, have we ever talked about it?
My
Because
favorite
mine
movie?
is obvious. We've talked about it a million times.
What, Man of Steel?
Well, obviously, Seven Samurai. That's a good
Right,
pick,
yeah. My favorite movie's probably still Empire Strikes Back, but you know that's
Oh, yeah.
kind of like a constant.
When was the last time you watched it?
Not recently enough. I've been talking to Caroline about this. Caroline and I have not watched Star Wars together yet, even though we're both big Star Wars fans. So
Whoa,
yeah,
that's wild.
yeah.
Actually, yeah.
So we need to watch the whole thing since we watched Clone Wars and we've been watching Bad Batch, and I want to do like Andor because I never got around to watching Andor. Yeah.
I haven't watched the OG Star Wars in like 15 years. I really need to do that.
Yeah.
That's because you're a normie, Greg. Okay, that's what we're learning on this podcast.
No, I just
Playing Marvel Rivals. Don't buy the skins. Okay.
I just
Watch
waiting for
Ace
Mike
Ventura: Pet Detective.
to sit me down and have me watch it. You know,
Yeah.
Oh man.
waiting for Mango to put that together.
I downloaded. I need to figure out where I put it, but I downloaded a version of either the prequels or maybe it was just the Clone Wars. That's like black and white in the Kurosawa style. That has like a name to it. That's like a whole thing. I need to figure out what this is because it's gonna drive me crazy. But it was like a famous. What's it called? It's like a famous fan edit type thing because like everybody's obsessed with making the prequels good, which is like a very interesting.
That is the kind of thing that would make me super horny to watch the prequels again. Not that I have a hard time watching the prequels because I find them in eminently watchable movies, but that's a great idea. I feel like it's like because there's the Mad Max cut that's also that the blood and chrome
Black and
cut
white one,
is the
yeah.
black and white one. Yeah.
Yeah, did that with Wolverine too, I think, or Logan.
Really?
The Logan.
Oh,
movie.
with Logan. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever
Same
watch
with,
Furiosa? I've been trying to get Mango to do. I think Furiosa was my Derpy award-winning movie of the year from 2024, right? But we haven't done an episode on it, even though I want to so fucking bad. Because
Yeah, I think it falls short. I don't know. I mean, I think like it was supposed to be
my heart.
from it premiered at Cannes, and I heard there that it was supposed to be animated. I don't know if I haven't fact checked that, but someone told me it's supposed to be animated. And I think that's why it has that kind of like over the top goofiness. To be fair though, I think Fury Road is like the perfect movie. So I don't know how you'd
Damn.
follow it up. Like Fury Road to me is like Mount Rushmore. It's so freaking good. They do so many like the opening sequence is awesome. Like it just you're just in it. It's like I know there's so much, like apparently the production is a complete and utter shit show and nightmare and just endlessly shooting and all sorts of stuff. But like what they got in the back end, what we got, the rest of the world got to see is like top 5 movies for me.
Is this deep vindicating Lou in the chat saying thank you? Someone else who doesn't worship Furiosa. I'm content.
The name of the fan edit is The Blackened Mantle.
The Blackened Mantle.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it cuts like Jar Jar out entirely, that kind of thing. So I need to. I haven't actually watched it yet, but I did download it. So
That's how you should watch it with Caroline. And then she's like, "What the fuck?" And you're like, "What? This is how I watch Star Wars movies. This isn't the Star Wars that you watched."
how can you cut out Darth Jar Jar? I will not stand for this Jar Jar slander. Jar Jar was never a Darth. I don't believe any of that hokum.
Oh yeah, you don't like Darth Plagueis, Robot Chicken, Jar Jar Binks?
No, I mean, well, it's kind of like ascended fanon at this point, right? That like I have heard some people suggest that was always like the intent, right? Was to like the big reveal at the end of the was at the end was that Jar Jar was the Sith Lord, and I don't have any reason to believe that that's true, but
Yeah, I am unconvinced. I think George Lucas is too he's such a straightforward filmmaker, right? Like there's
Yeah.
no way that any of that kind of stuff would ever be in his brain. Not that I would want to speak obviously for eminent, filmmaking legend George Lucas, but you could convince me that like Christopher Nolan, if he made like the like the prequels, he would have been like, "Oh, and did you catch that Jar Jar Binks was Darth Plagueis?" Like, yeah, that would absolutely be in a Christopher Nolan movie, but absolutely not in
yeah, you would name it something like Jar Gideus or something, like he'd be like, he'd at least have like a what's it called, a villainous sounding name like that. He's not capable of that level of like capable, maybe not is the wrong word, but he doesn't do it like that, essentially. Do you have any hot Star Wars takes, Greg?
No.
What do you have any hot movie takes? What are some of the do you have like a favorite director?
Not like a favorite. I mean, if you want hot takes, okay. Well, let me back to that. Things that I've liked this year. Nora, I thought Nora was great. I'm a big fan of Sean Baker's. I think he does a lot of good work. I think he's like doing good things for the indie scene and theaters in general. I didn't love The Brutalist by any means. I know a lot of people love that. I thought the first half was really good. I didn't really like the second half. I thought they kind of beat you over the head with the concept. I thought it was beautifully shot, and I think it was good filmmaking. But movie's not for me. I don't love biopics. I especially don't love fake biopics.
You don't like Matt. You don't like not Matt. What is that one? The biopic that's not real. Fuck. Dewey Cox. Walk Hard.
Yeah, Walk Hard.
Walk Hard like ruined every biopic ever for me at this
I watched
point.
like 5 minutes of that, whatever it was, 20 years ago. I was like, no, thank you.
Oh my god! Wait, really? You've never actually seen all of Walk Hard?
No, not all of it. No, I know
Oh.
that's one of the movie you really like, right?
Yeah, we did a whole episode on it.
We
maybe
did
like
just like randomly because it's just like a movie that we both love. But it is such a good. It is probably the best. I think I would say this is the best. Oh man, interesting. The best parody movie ever is Walk Hard. I don't think that any movie does a parody as good as Walk Hard. Like even something that I think like there are parody movies that I think are like quite good. It was like something like Robin Hood Men in Tights. A lot of the Mel Brooks stuff would kind of like be in there. You know what I mean? But none of them so accurately and so sort of like decisively just execute a whole genre of movies, these music biopics that Walk Hard does by just like completely,
Yeah, I should check it out. Sounds like a. I mean, I'm not gonna. I will guarantee my opinion from like 15 years ago is not the same as it is today.
yeah. So it came out when we were in high school, and so there is, more than a 0% chance that either of our opinions were formed as like a reaction to the other one's opinion. So like, if I like it, you might have just been like, well, no, right? Like
That's possible. Or you just wouldn't shut up about it for like 2 weeks. I was like, I can't hear.
Yeah,
about this
no, that
movie
makes
anymore.
sense. Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah. Your favorite cinematographer, that's Roger Deakins, right?
I mean, like, he is a cinematographer from today that I think is great. If I had
Okay.
to like pick one that like has been the most influential on me, or like maybe the reason I'm having this conversation now is probably like Dean Cundey, who's a guy from the '90s who actually is in The Mandalorian because he shot one episode and just wanted to be in it. He's like a background guy. But Dean Cundey has like probably the most impressive resume of anyone. Back to the Future, Jurassic Park, Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York, The Thing.
You think that's a more impressive resume than fucking Roger Deakins?
If you want, okay, think of all the movies that you watched as a kid. Start listing movies,
Oh
and
no,
he
no, no.
shot
Yeah. So hold on.
90%
I
of
totally
them.
understand. I 1000% would like agree with like that on a certain level, right? And I do think this isn't even me like shitting. I don't particularly like Robert Zemeckis or whatever, right? But like I respect the craft 1000% when it comes to something like Back to the Future or like Jurassic Park, right? But like Roger Deakins, like he I feel like he is it's very hard to convince me that someone has a better resume than Roger Deakins, I guess.
I mean, I guess how are you gauging films and like what's successful?
I don't know.
Like,
I maybe it's just because he works with director. Like my favorite director is Denis Villeneuve, so he shot a bunch of those, right? Blade Runner, Sicario is my favorite. Like that was one that I thought was like an amazing Roger Deakins. But also he did all of those Coen Brothers movies, right?
yeah,
No Country
most of
for
them.
Old Men and all of that. It's like you're gonna tell me that Back to the Future is more important than No Country for Old
I
Men?
mean, if we're talking about like reasons why I got into filmmaking, the dude who
Okay.
shot Hook might outweigh the guy who shot Prisoners.
Okay, fair
You
enough.
know,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
on the podcast we would call that a distinction between favorite and best, right?
yeah,
Like,
okay, that's fair.
well,
And
yeah,
I'm not gonna sit here and say like that. Like I don't think Roger Deakins is great work, but that's also like the low hanging fruit of like who's your favorite cinematographer. That's like every film school kid's answer is Roger Deakins.
yeah, that's
Not maybe
fair.
maybe not
I
today,
would
but
definitely push back on it just on the level of that's the basic bitch take. Okay, name me a
well, also
better
like I mean,
DP.
if you really want to get into it, early Deakins is different than like modern Deakins. A
Okay.
little more naturalistic. You can then I mean, also I think one of my favorite of his films in general is Rango. That might be my favorite film he has
Oh,
a DP credit
interesting.
on. Um, but there's
I
a lot
would
of good ones.
I would probably agree with that. All of the stuff I think that is really good, all of the the Deacon stuff is later. When I think about the early stuff, like I don't particularly think Shawshank Redemption is like an amazingly shot movie. Do you know
See,
what I mean?
that's where I might disagree with you. I think he did a lot. All that stuff looks incredibly natural, and the cinematography is pretty discreet. When it was a lot of lighting and a lot of work, and I think some of that stuff's better than like
Oh,
some of
really?
the.
I was taking it the opposite
Well,
direction.
no,
I was
but this is
thinking,
like the conversation from earlier of like like I mean, don't get me wrong, the Blade Runner 2049 crazy circle light stuff with all the
yeah.
reflections, that's cool, but like you don't watch those scenes. You watch you watch the crazy reflections. You know what I mean? That's like back to the part about like distracting cinematography. And Blade Runner 2049 is maybe not the best example because I think that is really well shot. And I think Deacon's strength is making things feel really natural, and he did such a good job in Blade Runner 2049 of making things like the future that we don't know or know what it looks like feel real and lived in and like very organic and like not stylized. Um, but I think in the earlier days, like Oh Brother and um, Shawshank, I think that does in that time period too does a really good job of being sort of like very natural and organic in a really for an image that's incredibly lit and like crafted.
Yeah, see,
These
I
days it's
think I
different
would
too.
maybe say Oh Brother is the first one. A lot of what I'm thinking about are these mid 2000s Coen Brothers movies, right? It's like Oh Brother, it's what's the one with the Jewish guy and the fucking tornado at
Serious
the
man.
end? A Serious Man, right? I actually don't know. He might not have shot that one, but I'm thinking like that is to me like that's where I feel like canonical Deacons comes from. That's where every film school kid loves him for that period. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair, and that's
And
like
all
I mean,
up through right this current period of the because then he also did all those Sam Mendes movies like
mm,
Skyfall and like all of the rest of those.
yeah.
I just feel like that's probably if I am in film school and saying to you that I think Roger Deakins is amazing, that's what I'm.
Well, he's also like he was the dude to birth the like what's the right way to say this like the I don't want to say the rock star DP, but like no one gave a shit about cinematographers
True, yeah, that's fair.
20 years ago, and now suddenly like they're like swaying weight and like Greg Fraser and Bradford Young and Deakins and Chivo and like uh, Jerry's Kanji and I mean there's tons of people that are like doing great work, but I mean, Darius Coney's maybe not a great example because I mean, a fantastic cinematographer, but his whole thing is like call him the chameleon because his look changes per director. But I don't think people cared so much about DPs as much now as they did, or sorry, they care more now than they used to. Like even like people like Robert Richardson are now more popular than they were just because people care about the images more. I guess it seems
You
like
know,
it's
honestly, that's probably fair. I'm doing it on the podcast, right? Like when I'm shitting on, I'm not super shitting on, but like Dean Cundey or whatever, right? Like the stuff that people give that period credit for, it always goes to the director, right? You don't talk about Jurassic Park and you go, well, the cinematographer. You talk about Spielberg. When you talk about Back to the Future or Roger Rabbit, everybody talks about Roger Rabbit, right? You always talk about Zemeckis. Nobody fucking says, I don't know if Dean Cundey did Roger Rabbit, but you know,
he
like,
did.
oh, well, that's a great example, right?
And
Like,
he was the first guy to incorporate overlapping animation and CGI into a live action. That's why he took that project.
yeah.
Literally every movie you think of, Flubber, Casper, any movie from that generation that like influenced you or creativity wise, that guy had a hand in it.
What about Point Break?
He did do Point Break, but
Or
Big Trouble in
Top
Little
Gun?
China.
Okay.
They did Big Trouble in Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China is a pretty good movie.
Yeah.
Who did? Do you know who did Point Break and Top Gun? I have no idea. I always think of those also by their
The
directors.
new Top Gun is a different dude than the old Top Gun. I don't.
I'm
I don't
looking
know.
up
That's a
Point
movie
Break
I've seen
now.
about
What,
5 billion times.
Point Break is Donald Peterman,
Hmm.
I've never
known
heard of that guy
for
before.
Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, Flashdance, Men in Black, and Point Break.
Okay. Yeah, because like those are also movies that I think people define by directors, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
When you say it's Top Gun, everybody is talking about the shots in there, but they attribute it all to Tony Scott.
Yeah. I mean, that's like part of it, and I guess I don't know. Like, I think like things like social media and like behind the scenes has changed. You know what I mean? Based off like my profession and whatever, my algorithm feeds me endless BTS of cameras and lights and blah blah blah. And I think people have become more familiar with like who's shooting stuff opposed to like 10, 20 years ago. You would just maybe somebody would care if you're really into it or if you were like part of it, but like I don't think people's voices kind of carry or styles carried over as much. And then you have people doing stuff like I mean Bradford Young's a huge one of like someone who like makes things really dark. I'm not like the biggest fan of Bradford Young's. I think he does great work on some stuff, but like there's some I don't love that sort of like muddy in the toe style that he's I don't want to say pioneer, but like advocated for a lot.
Sure.
That's just my humble opinion. Who am I? But like I think like you have more people that are becoming like auteur DPs versus like 20, 30 years ago, there was less ways to do stuff, and like now with the technology, like you look at like Greg Fraser and Oren Sofer on the creator doing like the FX3, a single lens, and like a lot of that is the directing as well, and like sort of that guy's style. But a huge part of it is like people can do things differently with technology, and like you can stand out or try a different technique that sort of like gets attention versus like 20 years ago, the biggest creative choice was like what film stock are we going to use?
Yeah.
Maybe the lenses made a factor, but like the camera didn't matter at all. All that was doing was pushing film through things. So I think it's just sort of like with the tech and sort of where we're at in filmmaking and creation of images, like you could have more of an impact than maybe you used to in the past.
Okay. That's true. Well, I think we're at the end of the podcast, which means I get to assign an assignment to you, Greg. You have to watch all 11 movies Fast and Furious franchise and then come on the podcast and tell us what you think. I'm just kidding. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover, Manga? Or are we good to call it?
No, I think we're good to call it. I had to ban a spammer in the chat. My apologies. Just to finish out the thought, the cinematographer for Top Gun was Jeffrey L. Kimball, known for Mission Impossible 2, Paycheck, Star Trek Nemesis, and Top Gun. So,
okay, well,
both directors or both cinematographers for those two films also cinematographed a Star Trek film. So there's something there, maybe.
Some crossover.
But with that, I'm gonna say if you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us subdersplaygames@gmail.com or podcast@subdersplaygames.com. Follow us at twitch.tv/playgames or youtube.com/subdersplaygames. These go out live. Rate and review us wherever you find podcasts. Links are all down in the description. Buddy, you looking to promote anything this week?
Well, Cabernet is out. Did we do a podcast since Cabernet is out? Guys, go play my my indie vampire narrative RPG Cabernet. And also, sorry, we're closed, but I think that's it.
And Greg, you want to do one last plug for Eephus before we get out of here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Eephus, the film. Eephus. You can go see it. Opens theaters March 7th. Spreads past that. Eephusfilm.com. Music Box is the distributor. If you Google Music Box Eephus, you'll find it. Someone's made a map of where to see it in America.
If you are listening to this post recording, I will have all of those links in the description. They're just like the Music Box page is in the description right now, but I will make sure it is in the description of the podcast version of this. So
yeah, go check it out. Tell me what you think. If you don't like it, that's cool. If you like it, that's also cool. Go have fun even if you don't like baseball. Go hate it and then tell me you hate it.
Do you want people to like follow you on socials or anything?
Sure. Greg Tango. Easy to find. GregTango.com. I'm very easily findable.
I'll put links in the description if you're that curious.
You can find my email and tell me how much you did or didn't like this movie, or that like you hated my take on whatever. Shame me for watching Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.
You got a very fun looking or a very fancy looking whiskey commercial on your Instagram page that people can go watch.
Yeah, if you want to go get advertisements, to go to my Instagram page. That's what I do outside of movies, is make commercials for selling shit. They look cool.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.
Dear listeners.